This is a big middle finger to all those people who be like, well, the druid says they won't wear metal armor. It's not that they can't. And they're like, all right, motherfuckers, now you can't.
Nerdarchy Ted.
And I'm Nerdarchy Dave.
Welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds. All right, heated topic, 1D&D Druid. Let's get into it.
All right, Druid versus Druid. We're going to start with the broad strokes, kind of comparing the two different Druids from 5e and what they've shown us in 1D&D so far.
Yeah, and looking at it, it's like a revelation of what is in the package of the 5e Druid, because reading through Druid the first time, for 5e, I didn't really have the same feels that I had, reading through the Druid for 1D&D, and yet it's so much more, but it feels so much less.
Yeah, I mean, going through our first initial, takeaway from the Druid from 1D&D is, it is kind of vanilla. We're not excited about it. It feels like a giant step backwards. But then it's like, sometimes I understand you need to take, you can look at something and feel a certain way, but then when you kind of divorce your emotions of it and just look at the hard hold facts side by side, there's a different story there. But it doesn't really negate that initial feeling, and we'll get into that as we talk about it more.
All right, so let's look at, the 5e Druid and see what's there.
Okay, so in your basic proficiency packages, there's only two real major changes, like saving throws, skills, tool proficiency. So far, they're all the same. Armor training is one place, and weapons proficiencies is the other, where something changes.
So for the 5e D&D Druid, the weapon proficiencies, you get clubs, daggers, darts, javelins, maces, quarterstaffs, scimitars, sickles, slings, and spears. Whereas when you go to the 1D&D Druid, it's just simple weapons. So much easier to deal with.
It's so much easier to deal with, and you're probably going to get more options. Armor training, they're very similar. The only difference is that the 1D&D Druid doesn't get medium, where the 5e Dungeons and Dragons Druid does get medium armor, which means no hide, but also dragon scale armor, any of the really unique armors that are made from a different type of material is no longer up for grabs when it comes to medium armor for the 1D&D Druid. But also I feel like this is a big middle finger to all those people who be like, well, the Druid says they won't wear metal armor. It's not that they can't. And they're like, all right, motherfuckers, now you can't.
Yeah. So without the, all of that issue aside, it is a challenge. Druids do have that feeling that they have the ability to play because they wild shape, because they get into animal form, they can get into trouble. So being able to put on the heavier, the medium armor makes a big difference, for when you come out of wild shape. I've played and seen druids that are martial combatants, even though they are full spellcasters and really shouldn't be going in that direction. But when you begin mixing that with other classes and what have you, I've seen barbarian druids and druid monks and all these other things that really mesh well with the druid abilities. So having that medium armor can make a difference. Not that it applies for monks, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, at the early tiers of the game, it doesn't matter. It's at the upper tiers when you might get armors made from unusual materials that this could be a factor. It's still playtest. We'll see. Now, the other thing is they're both full spellcasters. Nothing's changed there. Now, one of the things we're talking about, and we did in our live chat, we were talking about it, and Ted was like, everything has everything to do with wild shape with the new druid. They can do other things too, So I was like, yeah, you're right, Ted. And then I went back and looked, and I'm like, matter of fact, there are literally more abilities listed for the original 5e Dungeons and Dragons Druid over the 1D&D Druid for wild shape. But we'll go into why what Ted said actually makes sense. So when you look at the two druids side by side, you realize, it's true that the new one does get more wild shape features, but it also doesn't have any dead levels. You get abilities or something at every single time. And the 5e D&D Druid, all of their features actually have everything to do with wild shape and nothing else.
Yeah, and with a lot of spellcasters in 5e core, there's a lot of dead levels, and a lot of them are on those levels where a new spellcasting level or a new spell slot level is obtained, which that in and of itself is always a grand thing for spellcasters. So with that initial 5e design, you can see, well, they don't need anything there because they're already getting access to some new spellcasting potential. But when you look at the 1D&D, the amount of wild shape features that are put there are a little crazy, especially because I've seen druids who rarely use or don't care about their wild shapes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that being said, you will get some other ways to use wild shapes. The one D&D Druid has other things it can do with its wild shapes, but it's not called wild shapes. It's called channel nature, right? And they can use it for different things. I mean, going forward, that might be interesting. And so I guess the other place is subclass features. They both get them all at the same exact levels, except for when you first get your subclass 5e D&D Druid, you get it at level 2. And 1D&D Druid, you get it at level 3 because that's where everyone gets their subclasses thus far. So that covers like the broad strokes of, the 1D&D Druid versus the 5e Druid. Now we're going to drill down, and this is where we're going to really get into the differences.
So, channel nature versus wild shape. Wild shape, you have limited number of uses. With the 5e D&D, you get them back on a short rest. No problem. Druid is very proficient in changing forms. When you get into your channel nature ability, while you can use it to wild shape, you also have the ability to do other things, your healing blossoms, and potentially other things that might come from your subclasses. That's pure speculation, but you only get one back on a short rest. So you gotta rest for 2 hours to get them both back. I know that's a little bit wonky, a little bit weird.
Well, yeah. So here's the thing: you get 2 uses of wild shape. They come back on a short rest in 5e D&D. In 1D&D, you start with 2 channel natures, and you can get one of them back on your short rest. But that goes all the way up to 4, and you can always rest for 1, so you get half as many back. So it's a slight difference, but also you also have more uses for it. Like you said, you have your healing blossom that you can use, but you can also use it to cast Find Familiar from as well.
And that's another one that's a bit of a needle to me, because when you finish your long rest, it ends the familiar duration, where normally a familiar is until it's done. You make that bond and it's there forever. So it's a little bit frustrating that this shouldn't, that this goes away. I would play you summon your familiar, and if it dies, you can cast it again using your channel nature, but it should just last.
Yeah, they basically don't want you to just, summon your familiar and then have it. They want it to cost something. Right. It's clear. So now let's get into the actual wild shapes. This is where the 5e Dungeons & Dragons Druid really stands apart from the 1D&D Druid. And this is the part where we feel that really makes you feel like the 1D&D Druid is so much more about the wild shapes, but it's also really not that impressive.
So with wild shape in 5e, you have a challenge rating that you can do based off of your level and the abilities of the said creature, and you can look through whatever stat blocks you have available to you, and that gets to be all kinds of fun. Can I find an animal that is going to help me fix the problem or help me solve the problem that I've got in front of me right now? When you look at the 1D&D, you get access to a set stat block. And, that's it. So whether you want an animal of the land, a sky, of the sea, all of these things just kind of break down and are incredibly vanilla, because you don't have the creature with pack tactics, or the creature, that can do this other cool ability, or that has, a really powerful attack or a really good armor class or what have you. You don't have the ability to adjust. You've got a generic stat block.
Yeah, you have a generic stat block. And in 5e Dungeons and Dragons, the druid at 4th level and 8th level, you get swim speed at 4th, and then a fly speed at 8th level. And then in one D&D, it's slightly different. I know the creature of the sky comes in at 9th level, and I'm not sure where the sea creature comes in. It's like, maybe 6th or 7th or 5th. But the point is, it just gives you access to a different stat block. And the stat blocks are very generic, very uninteresting. I mean, when you gain the ability to fly, you're only doing a D4 points of damage. You are going to get extra attack, so you can attack 2, but they're not that impressive. And on top of all that, you can't even turn into tiny creatures until much higher. You're like 11th level or something before you get access to tiny creatures. So a lot of the utility of wild shaping has been stripped away, but also all of the tankiness is gone, and now relies on your hit dice and your hit points. If you're a 1D&D druid, where in 5e D&D, basically you gain temporary hit points equal to whatever amount the wild shape was. So even a piddly, beast with 10 hit points gave your druid 10 extra hit points, making them super tanky. But if you turned into like a giant constrictor snake with 60 extra hit points, that was pretty beefy, right? And even if you got knocked out of it, you can wild shape again. So, you could easily stack on hundreds of extra hit points onto your druid, especially at the higher levels. If you're Circle of the Moon, you get those, bumptier animals that you can turn into. But in 1D&D, they totally stripped away your tankiness of the druid, any druid for that matter, and the utility and the fun. We're nerds. We like to pour through the books and compare the stat blocks and be like, oh, this monster is way weaker in hit points than this one, but it flies. It's a snake. It does 3d12 poison. 3d4 poison damage. Like, looking at all the nuance is a lot of fun for me, and I suspect other nerds as well.
It also gives you the ability to both mechanically and visually theme your character. I've had druids that were, designed on a very like avian theme. So it's like, all right, this is what I want to have. So all of my things are related to what that is. And, yes, now you can say, all right, well, I can visually be whatever I want, but there's no mechanics to back any of that up. If you want to have a very, snake-like feel, oh, I'm a Yuan-Ti druid, and I do all of this, so everything I turn into is a snake, well, there's no poison damage in my stat block for creature of the land, so I've lost all of that aspect of my build. And that can really upset a lot of people, because if you're going to transition from 5e to 1D&D, like a lot of people feel like they're going to have some neutered characters.
And it's partially that, and to me, frankly, it's just boring. So I think, in a nutshell, that like so much of the 1D&D druid is dedicated to one aspect of the character that everyone I've talked to so far just finds it very boring and vanilla. It's hard to get excited about it, even though you can do more with it technically, but it feels like infinitely less at the same time.
There's more options that are built into the core class, but the options that they've removed, if you really take a look at it whole cloth, like hundreds of monsters, all of these beast stat blocks that you would have had access to before are gone. So the options are indeed less.
It is less. I mean, it's simplified, probably a lot easier to program for a VTT, and less difficult for new players to find have to find the beast stats, and less confusing. But I feel like we lost a lot of nuance. But with that, let's move on to the final phase of this video, and that is Circle of the Moon Druid versus Circle of the Moon Druid.
All right, so this one's a little bit tough. When you begin looking at it, yes, there's going to be some positive aspects to the new change, but when I take in the bigger picture, I got to say that I'm disappointed in this too.
Yeah, I mean, when you start off, they're themed kind of similarly. They go about it differently. You get combat shapes from early on with the 5e. Circle of the Moon Druid, which basically ups the CR you can change into, and then ups it again at the latter levels. You're also going to be able to use a bonus action to wild shape. You can use a bonus action also to sack out spell slots in order to heal your beast form.
So with the One D&D Druid, Circle of the Moon, you're going to get access to being able to cast abjuration spells, which is the new way for casting healing spells like Cure Wounds and that kind of stuff. So you still can technically cast those spells while you are wild shaped.
As long as they don't require a material component.
Right. So like that is a little bit of a wonky bit. You're going to get quick attack, which means you can make, a secondary attack and be a little bit more aggressive in your form, but
it's going to cost you your bonus action.
It's going to cost you your bonus action, so you can't do other things with it as well. So like I feel like it is stepping down in power.
And they also get Swift Transformation, which lets them change as a bonus action. So yeah, again, like in this one aspect, I kind of appreciate how they tried to like emulate the 5e D&D Druid Circle of the Moon, but it falls flat. And also, like, I would have to look through all the abjuration spells and be like, okay, how cool is casting abjurations with no material components for this type of for this type of character? How many spells does a druid actually get access to? Like you said, if the healing spells are abjuration, okay, you can do that. It's good for you. It's good for your allies. And it also, like, they're really working really hard to pigeonhole the One D&D Druid into this healing role. I mean, because like they also get their, not the Circle of the Moon, but the regular one, that Healing Blossom, which basically like a 10-foot block you can put out in the field when you do it, and it just heals a number of D4s that your wisdom mod, right? And then you roll that and you divide it up amongst the different people in that area that you want to heal. It's not even like they all gain that amount, right? So it's it's almost like a poor man's lay on hands, but at range. I guess in a pinch it's probably okay, and later on it gets a little bit better, which we'll get into.
So at 6th level for the 5e, you're going to get magic attacks, so therefore while you're wild shaped, your natural attacks will count as magical against monsters and things that you're attacking. There's not a huge amount of things that are out there that have magic resistance essentially, but there's enough that it's kind of needed when it's needed.
Yeah, well, it's not so much magic resistance. There's plenty of those, but immunity is the big one you have to worry about because that means you're just useless, right? And you also get the higher CR, so it becomes a 3rd, so you can turn into much cooler things. So at 6th level, that means up to challenge 2.
So then with your One D&D Druid for Circle of the Moon at 6th level, you're going to get some elemental resistance and damage. So basically, it means when you transform, you can pick an elemental type, you gain resistance to that, and you have the ability to convert your damage to be all of that damage type or a portion thereof.
Yeah, you can turn into a thunder cat or a fire cat or a lightning cat, any kind of cat you want of any kind of element that's listed. And like Ted said, you either do the damage as normal or as that, and you get the resistance. It's kind of weird and feels unnatural for what the Circle of the Moon Druid felt like it should be before. Now you're some kind of Pokemon.
Yeah, I definitely feel that, and I kind of called that out when we did our live chat talking about this. Like, the idea of, to me, the Circle of the Moon is like you've got ability to blend in. Well, once you hit 6th level and you kind of become this elemental creature, almost, it's one of those things that I feel like you're going to have the opposite. You're not going to blend in. You're going to stand out. If you got flames or steam coming off of you, if you seem to be made more of rock or lightning, people are going to notice that shit, and you're not going to be able to blend in with the natural surroundings.
Yeah, I mean, how many times does a druid use wild shape actually as like a disguise? All right, 10th level, 5e D&D Druid Circle of the Moon. This is a big loss. for the druid going into 1D&D elemental form. You can blow 2 of your wild shapes to actually turn into an elemental: a fire elemental, earth elemental, air elemental, or water elemental. Which technically, you have a language, you have limbs. I would say you could cast spells in that form.
Yeah, I definitely, called this out right away. I love this aspect of what the druid is. You are born, a creature of the elements, so I feel like having the ability to just fully encompass this, it's useful in so many different ways. It's just awesome. And instead of getting this, you get more of an elemental transformation in your animal form, and now do extra elemental damage of whatever it is that you've turned into. So
Yeah.
it's like, woo.
Yeah, the 1D&D Druid, basically, you know how they got that elemental attack? Well, instead of just swapping your damage for that elemental type, you're going to add that elemental type to the damage, or it could all be from that if you want. And then it goes up again, so D6 and then 2D6.
So not very impressive to be like, yes, now I really am a fire lion versus I'm a fire elemental.
I will say it probably makes all your other wild shapes way better as far as damage output than the 5e D&D Druid, but I still prefer the 5e D&D Druid.
It's just not as cool to me. I mean, it's whether, like, if you want to just say, oh, well, as a fire lion, you really are an elemental. Well, maybe, but it doesn't present that to me.
I don't feel like people play Circle of the Moon for that, right? And that's why, or play Druids for that. They want to be the animal. They don't want to be the Pokemon version of the animal, or maybe you do.
Well,
but like, I feel like that should be a specific subclass.
Sure. So 14th level, we kind of wind up seeing this for both the 5e and the 1D&D. You get Alter Self at will. It's very, very fitting for what that particular subclass is. So we really don't have any gains or losses.
Yeah, it's just leaning into the Druid's ability to the shape change. So, in a nutshell, those are the 2 versions of the Circle of the Moon Druid. You can decide which one you like. I mean, the 1D&D one does have some things that make it a bit more powerful on the average, but not quite. I don't think it quite stacks up to being a full-blown elemental, or nearly as much fun as being a full-blown elemental.
Yeah, and I feel like the creature type, the being able to look through and like pour through the text and find, what stat block I want to use, and having things that are like at the ready for different scenarios is a fun aspect of the game. And you absolutely lost that. And to me, that hurts.
It does.
So if you like all the stuff that Nerdarchy does and you'd like to help us out, why not come check out Nerdarchy the store, or come follow us on Patreon and support us over there. Links are going to be down below.
Let us know which version of the Druid you like better. Give us the pros and cons for your choice down in the comments below. Share it with the Nerdarchy community.
While you're down there, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, click on that notification bell. You know you want to.
Quick reminder, we drop new videos here on the channel several times a week, so come on back. But you can't wait till then, no worries. We got you covered. You can check out Druid and Paladin for 1D&D playtest discussion. We did a live chat on it. You can find it up here.
So until next time, stay nerdy.